with Noah, he actually ran a Green Tide list, and Noah was actually in our Discord, so he gave me a couple pointers of points of conversation reference of his game. So we can actually take a look at it here together, because we always think wind path is very important. So let's take a look at his list, which is the Green Tide. He calls us Surfs Up, 2 Painboys, 2 Warbosses, with 1 with Ferocious Show Off, a Mega Boss in Warboss and Mega Armor with Ruckus Warcaller, and then a Weird Boy with Bloodthirsty Belligerent. So normally I would only pay for 1 enhancement, but it's interesting that he decided to put all 3. I don't think they're bad at all. They're actually pretty cheap. So he took 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 20-man units of boys, and then a 10-man unit of boys. I found myself playing with about the same amount of boys as well. The 120 max just feels like you don't really have a lot of other stuff to do actions with, and it takes up even more time. You kind of want to free up points for something that can kill, or in this case, transport a battle wagon. So he has 1 truck, 1 battle wagon, 1 grot unit, and he also found the points to fit in the Kommandos. That's another reason why you wouldn't want to bring the full max unit of boys, because you're trying to free up some points for stuff like this. He has good infiltrating tech to start with. Mega Knobs, because everybody loves Mega Knobs, and only 1 Stormboy unit. I found that pretty interesting, as most people want at least 2. He's really optimizing his scoring potential with the 10-man unit, the truck, and the Kommandos if he can, but it's matchup dependent, as we've seen when he actually went into his game. So he does have his own I think network that he's on, so we'll show that in the comments after the stream. So he will go over his path, his his win path, as that's always very important. And I'll try to keep in mind some of the notes he gave me, because he did have Dark Angels. He said it was nothing too interesting with the Dark Angels list that he felt like he wanted to reference. So he said it's Azrael, Captain and Terminator Armor, Librarian Terminator Armor with Deathwing Assault. We have Deathwing Knights, Deathwing Terminator Squad, Infiltrators, Inner Circle's Companions, Redeemer, Dreadnought, Scout. So the point why he said there's nothing really to write home about is because this list is really durable, but it's not going to out OC you or kill you fast enough to stop you from scoring and maxing out primary and denying their primary. This is one of those matchups that they might not die, but they're not killing you fast enough to really get through everything. And the little bit of power claws that you do get through, the damage you do get through from killing a couple of them, all the ones they roll because you're just throwing buckets of dice at them, as they're losing killing potential and such, you're still just winning in the game, limiting their score very much. So he actually didn't have much thing to say about that. Most of us know that that's not the most competitive version of Dark Angels, but it is nice to see how that would actually look on paper, because a lot of Space Marine players would think, well, if I bring a bunch of Terminators, I just won't die. And yeah, maybe you won't, but we won't either, not before we actually take over the whole table. So that was Noah ended up flexing on the Space Marine Dark Angels list. Now, as to his Necrons list, he said it was a destroyer cult. He was worried about the flayed ones, but he was able to take a 20-man unit of boys on the top of the objective, and Commando Squad was to bait his Scorpex turn 1, and then he called a wall and he picked up all those units. So pretty much he played more of the counter kind of offensive, but used his commandos as bait in this Necron matchup. So he has a Scorpec Lord, another Scorpec Lord, the Silent King, Canoptic Scarab Swarms, 2 of them, 2 Death Marks, 2 Dooms Arcs, 2 units of Flayed Ones, which also have infiltration, I believe, Heavy Destroyer, and then 2 units of the Scorpec Destroyers. Those guys do have the devastating wound potential, so they can actually do some damage on paper. That's most, and they get a good amount of attacks, a good strength, so they're winning on 3s, and they're getting rerolls. So you definitely don't want to just give up your units to a unit like this. You could just fail to, survive enough, and they do pick up one of your units and start really bothering you and killing you too quickly. That's the thing with Green Tide, is he didn't want to give up any of his units turn 1. What he did was just put up 20-man unit to kind of bait stuff out and play the mission, his commandos to pull out the Scorpex, and then he counterpunched with everything else on turn 2 against this kind of list, which in my opinion was very smart, because you don't really want to get stuck in a toe-to-toe, let them get the initiative on you with these Scorpec Lords. And the Silent King himself, he I guess kind of punches a little, does some shots, but he's really relying on you rolling poorly to get through that. So great job with taking over the Necrons by that. Then we have his round 3 matchup. He said was a combined arm Space Wolves player, but he just didn't have the tools. So let's take a look at these tools that he might have been lacking. So he had Champions of Rough Detachment, a Captain, a Chaplain and Terminator Armor, a Cyber Wolf, Librarian and Terminator Armor, Lieutenant, Wolf Pack, Leader with the Jump Pack. So right off the bat, without even looking at the rest of this, I can see why you're saying he doesn't have enough tools. He has so many characters that are taking these points that aren't just straight up Thunderwolf Cav, which means these aren't the tools as we see in the first matchup that are going to help you in this, like the Terminator Chaplain and the Librarian and Terminator Armor. So we can see where this is headed, right? He has Blood Claws, Gray Hunters. So these are like cheap battle line units that in theory you could punch with the Sons of Rust. A Razorback with Twin Las Cannons, units. Land Raider, and this one actually has a god last cannon, so that obviously doesn't have much to kill besides the battle wagon. So then we have a Long Fang unit with more last cannons, Predator Annihilator with twin last cannon, a Scout, Skyclaws, Terminators, Wolfen Dread, So yeah, he doesn't have the tools to deal with something like a Green Tide. He was a combined force. This guy's looking at other armies saying, I'm going to pop your Land Raiders, I'm going to get out, I'm going to punch you. I have little skirmishing units to go to you with Space Marines. I have reliable infantry to shoot. So this list was thought out. It's just against something like a Green Tide or any kind of hard skew this list would suffer against, and that's what he ran into with Noah. So good job, Noah, by taking that over. So in his fourth matchup, he said he was a familiar GT player he was used to, was hypercrypt, and he said it was Sights of Power, Hammer, and Anvil. So let's take a look at this list real quick. He said Seller of the Catan, hypercrypt legion. So we have Catan Shard, Nightbringer, Catan Shard, Void Dragon, Hexmark, Destroyer, Technomancer, Wraith, Doomsday Arks, Locust Destroyer, just individuals, just to go around play mission. And then even Tomb Blades, which actually could have good volume, but I think they had these other weapons I'm not familiar with. So right here, he was saying, well, in this game, he said he took Assassinate so he could try to kill his characters, but in Noah in response consolidated all his characters and kept all their squads back or in the vehicle, so they limited his scoring. He manipulated the characters, which is exactly how you should play that if you're going into someone who's trying to take Assassinated to you. And he said he just screened out wide for the Nightbringer, and he didn't cross the mid table either, but neither did he. He called a turn 4 WAAAGH, swarm the board to get primary. He killed 2 characters all game, and he got to deploy, but kept him at about 20-ish primary. So he did have to give up some primary because he's kind of just ignoring the Catans and such. But with that being said, he responded and played more passively for a turn 4 charge WAAAGH. So some people would be like, what? Turn 4 WAAAGH is unheard of, unreasonable. It's very much reasonable. It's really matchup dependent, especially something like this where you're just using it for board presence in that case, because its killing potential isn't going to swing that much into multiple Catans and these Wraiths. You know, they'll swing a little bit, but you're still winning on what you were winning on before. It doesn't change anything. So yeah, it's I can see why he played more kind of passive to a certain extent, but he played it very wisely for a turn 4 WAAAGH, because most people would never do that. They would never have the patience or the know-all to be like, I need to really hold this so that I can kind of deny the points at the end of the game and throughout the game with denying his Assassinate. So definitely take that in mind if you ever are playing some kind of list like this with the Green Tide. You have to manipulate where your characters are if they ever do take Assassinate, as that's their weakness. Now you have control over their secondary, so it really is your fault if they die to a certain extent, right? Some tricks around that as well is they can't epic challenge your characters if your character is actually visibly out of line of sight. So if your character is actually behind a solid wall and the rest of your mob is not, you cannot be epic challenged. So there are ways to get around being epic challenged with your boys, but Noah really took advantage of that. So great job there. And then last but not least, he went into Space Wolf jail. So we had Stormland Task Force Space Wolf. So in this kind of matchup, the fact that the Space Wolf cavalry can back up, charge, advance, charge, that's actually a big problem, and that actually hurts you. One of the things about the Green Tide is it's very much about controlling your rate of attrition, right? You don't really want to give up anything in the beginning of the game. That way, by the end of the game, they still haven't killed enough, and you have a separation of points. Something like the Wolf, Thunderwolf Cav get out of combat, get back in combat with you as they push you off the objective. They box it out and everything like that, and they use their bases to box you from getting enough boys on there, and hopefully you don't kill them in response. So it's very much an initiative game here where you have to pull out some of their resources and hope that they overcommit. That way you can completely counterpunch them with the wall and cripple them enough that they don't have a good rate of attrition into you. So let's take a look at the rest of this list. It goes, he has a lieutenant with combi weapon, a Lord Grimnar, Wolf Guard battle leader on Thunderwolf, good Wolf Guard battle leader on Thunderwolf, Wolf Guard battle leader on Thunderwolf, awesome. And then triple Wolf Lords on Thunderwolf. So he's going full cake right there. 2 infiltrator squads. A lot of armies are teching into infiltrators. When I mean like all the Space Marine armies, but also other armies are trying to screen because something like hypercrypt still exists. Grey Knights are still around doing work. So having infiltrators does stop you. And it really, as it's worded, just keep in mind that the Weird Boy still has to respect the 12-inch aura because he's considered coming in from reserves in the ruling, how it's worded when you come off the side of the table. So infiltrators will still stop your Weird Boy with the belligerence of getting in and on you. So it is still useful against us, even in the Green Tide matchup. 1, 2, 3 units of Thunderwolf cavalry, 3 units of Vindicators. Vindicators are brutal because they can actually shoot you while they're in combat. So That's a big deal, and they have their blasts and such, and they can actually shoot their blast weapons in combat is what I meant by that. So if he gets lucky enough, he's just blowing away some of these units as well. He said some of the notes though from his game is he didn't find out the missions until that each round, so that's how it was. He said there was good terrain in the middle of the table. He said his Giant Slayer boss with the +3 strength killed 2 Land Raiders and the Silent King, so he was what he more relied on the hard target. And the character with the Giant Slayer was in the battle wagon along with the Painboys. So yeah, and with the weird, and then he just had all the other characters broken up into each one of the units. So in this sort of matchup, like I said before, what's they're missing here though, that I think makes this a little bit easier for the Green Tide player as a whole, is he doesn't have the Wolfen to kind of take the initiative from you and kind of some more slow play it with you and then countercharge you instead as the Ork player. Because if he gets the Wolfen on you, of course they can't really play the primary, but they can kind of stop you in place as your Green Tide units might not hit them hard enough. They have a 4-up invuln, 2 wounds of pop, T5, 6-up feel no pain. The fact that those weren't on here meant that the Thunderwolf Cavalry player did have to commit, most likely, and in that response, I'm sure Aaron was smart enough to screen and not really let him get what he wanted to get in on there and kill him in the response. So great job by, I said Aaron, Noah did a great job here by beating the Space Wolf Jailers. That's a very powerful army, and it's actually one of the few armies that can actually take out the Green Tide list if they take the initiative from you. So this was a 120 person event, and then there were some drops he said in there, but overall that's a grand tournament, so it was very legit. He won his golden ticket to the GW championships off this. Of course, he had to be an excellent player to be able to run Green Tide within the time limit. So if you want to know more, he has his channel. We'll post it in the comments, and he's a part of our Discord, so you can run up in there and talk to that git because he's really nice and comforting to speak to about Green Tide. So here we go. War for Noah. If you enjoyed the clip, check out the full video here. If you'd like to see more tactics, click here.
Let's get stuck in, lads!